Guys, welcome back. Let's dive in and start setting up our player. So from our project window, go find the sprite sheet that we cut up in the last video, and let's just start with this idle one. Go ahead and take that sprite and drag it into the hierarchy. If you need to, make sure you reset the position, make sure she's at 0, 0, 0. And then let's also create a just a temporary ground for her to walk on while we do all this testing. So I'm going to right click, go to make a 2D object and make a sprite and a square. If you can only make a regular sprite, that's fine. Just find some sprite to fill in for this. Same thing, I'm going to reset that position. Grab my move tool up here, bring this down. And then we're going to use my scale tool right there and just make it a little wider so I have something to walk on. All right, so for our ground, this needs to have a box collider 2D component, something to run into. And then let's go back to our warrior. Let's rename this player because that sprite is not going to stay as idle one forever. Let's also give her a box collider 2D and then a rigid body 2D. So add component, start typing in rigid body, find that rigid body 2D. So she doesn't fall over. Here under constraints, open that up and freeze the rotation Z, just so that she can't just tilt over in case she catches something on the ground. Just kind of further into our game, we don't want that to fall over. And then let's create our script. Kind of my new favorite way to create a script is jump down, click on add component, and just start typing in the name of your script. So this is going to be player movement. And it's going to act like there's nothing there because there is no player movement script. So that's our only option. And then it'll auto-complete that for you. The name of your new script is going to be player movement. We'll create and add that. So there's no adding that we have to do. The only real cleanup that there is to this is making sure that you put that new script from the root assets folder into your scripts folder. And then we can go back to our player and let's open that up in Visual Studio. So first we're going to start by creating some variables. So here, before start, I'm going to make my own comment up here. So 2 forward slashes. And I'm going to just separate out my variables into different sections. So these are going to be my component references. And then a little further down, I'm going to have some movement variables. So my first component reference is going to be a private rigid body 2D, and I'm going to call that RB. So now that we have that variable declared, let's go and assign it. We assign it here in start, and we'll say RB equals get component, and then in angle brackets, the component we're going to get is a rigid body 2D. Get component is a method, so it does need open and close parentheses and that semicolon. Now to get our guy moving, we need some movement variables. So under there, I'm going to have a private float called horizontal velocity. I'm going to abbreviate that slightly to just horiz velocity. As you get better at coding, you're probably going to want this to be a little bit shorter than that, just so you don't have to type so much. This could just be like hvel. But if you're following in my class, we're still pretty new at this, so we want to make this as clear as we can in our code. So a longer name is better for readability. And then we need another variable. This one's going to be public. It's also a float, but this one is speed. So now that we have this declared, I'm going to assign it on the same line. So I want speed to equal 4. I'm going to say 4f because it's a float. Because this is public, it's going to show up in the inspector. And we can still change that value in the inspector. Inspector values overwrite anything that's in our code. So if this ends up being too fast, too slow, we can still go in and change it, even though we're giving it kind of a starting value here. So I'm going to scroll down below my update function. So after this curly brace, but before the closing curly brace for the whole class, added some space there. And I'm going to start writing my own method. It's not going to return anything, so it's a void. And I'm going to call this move h for move horizontal. Syntax says that we have to have open and closing parentheses there, and then the open and close curly braces for this. And let's just enter, and now we're indented more. The first thing we're going to set up is we're going to get input from the player. This is going to be a little different. This is Unity specific coding. But first I'll set up a float. And it's going to be just called x. This is just a kind of temporary variable that we're getting every time that move h is called. And it's going to be equal to input.getAccessRaw. GetAccessRaw is a method, so it has arguments that it needs to take. So it goes into parentheses. And we're looking for what we put in these parentheses is the axis name from Unity. So for horizontal, it's just called horizontal. This has to be spelled correctly because it is looking for something specific from the Unity editor. So make sure you get horizontal spelled right. And then on my next line, I'm going to say that horizontal velocity is equal to x. So from right here, just from the line before, x times speed. And then to actually apply that to our character, we're going to put it into our rigid body. So we'll say rigid body dot velocity, changing the velocity of our rigid body, which then moves our player. Or say that equals a new vector 2. Vector 2 takes an x and a y value. The x value is our horizontal velocity. Then we have a comma, and then whatever our y velocity is. We don't want that to change as our player moves around. So we're just going to type in rb.velocity.y. So we're taking whatever value it is currently and throwing it back into itself. So after that, we need that semicolon. The last thing we need to do is we want to be able to move every frame. So I'm going to copy this name move h, and I'm going to call it in update. So I'll paste that in here and add a semicolon there. So this is kind of like just writing these 3 lines of code inside of update, but what I'm doing is kind of making like a modular system for our movement. So if we come back and have to troubleshoot, then it's a lot easier to say, okay, well, instead of looking through a whole 50 lines of code for all my movement, if I know it's in movement, then I just go to my movement function and look through a smaller amount of code. So let's save this and head back over to Unity. This is going to compile and make sure that we got everything right. And here in our player movement, we have that speed variable. Let's play and see what happens. So I'm pressing my right and my left arrows, and I'm moving around. It's a good start. So to explain a little bit about that line of code where we're getting the horizontal axis, if we go into our project settings, that's under Edit in the Unity menu. So Edit Project Settings. Let's take a look at this. So in my Input Manager, there on the side, if you expand this axes, you can see that we have all of these axes that we can choose from. So one is horizontal and one is vertical. The horizontal is the name of that axis. So that's why whatever is typed in here has to be exactly like what we're calling from our code. If that doesn't, if this were spelled wrong, say if I take that off, then we come back to Unity, and it's telling me I have a little error here. Horizontal is not set up. This axis doesn't work. And because this is getting called every frame, the number of errors is going crazy because I'm playing my game. Again, you have to be very clear with your typings. Let me save that again. And I can clear out those errors. All right, So let's see if we can get our character to jump, because what's a platformer without jumping? Probably pretty boring. So back in our code, we're going to add some more movement variables. We have a horizontal velocity. We need a vertical velocity as well. If we want her to be able to go up, we got to have a vertical velocity. So similarly, we'll have a private float, only this time we're going to go vert velocity. And then we need to give a jump force. So another public float for our jump force. And again, just like speed, I'm going to assign that here as well. I'm going to say 5.5f. And for our jump, I'm going to go down. I'm going to write another method. So under my move, let's do another void just called jump. And in this one, I'm going to get a different axis. We're going to start with this with an if statement. Our condition is if we press the space bar. But we're going to do that all complex for Unity. So we're going to say input dot get button down. And then in parentheses, the button we're going to get is our jump button, which just so happens to be space. In curly braces for our if statement. Now we'll say vert velocity equals our jump force. And then we're going to change our velocity again every time we press space by going rb.velocity equals a new vector2, just like our previous line. Only our x and y values are going to be rb.velocity.x instead of y. So that goes into for the x value, and then comma, and our y value is going to be our vertical velocity. I'm going to copy that and paste that in there too. And add my semicolon. And just like our move h up here, we need to call our jump function as well. And let's save that and head back to Unity and check this out. Hit play. So I can move left or right, and I can jump and come down, she hits the ground. So there's still a whole lot more to do, because one thing, you can just keep jumping. So that's one thing we can fix later. But next time we're going to set up some of our basic animations. So join me then.